Did that come through? Terribly. All the squealing. Well, it's feedback from I run an iPad or not an iPad, I run a tablet on the side so I can see what I'm presenting, and that kind of, normally I turn everything off on that one, but the speaker was still on. Okay, so who are we? And this is basically the Juliet Sierra, you can see there. That's the other me. Okay, so we're still... okay, someone wants to join this call. Okay. Admit. Okay. And there she is. Hi, Noah.
Hi.
So who are we missing? We got Brad. We got. Okay, I think we can get started. Let me just take a quick look there. Is Doug there? Doug, are you there? Oh, he's missing it. Okay. Brad. Reg is not there yet. So let's give it another minute here. Sometimes people are sending me frantic emails like the last time saying, what's the link, right? But so far, no frantic emails. Okay. So there's what I want to do today is I'd like to sort of go through questions 50 to 100 on that exam we worked on, or you guys worked on for the first 50 questions, and work on those, and then explain a few things. We want to go a little deeper into weather and into the abbreviations and how to interpret the weather report, the METARs and the TAFs. And there's one other, that's the FA, the area forecast. Show you what they look like. And but before we get started, are there any questions to the stuff we have covered so far? Where you say, man, I haven't, this is something keeps coming up and I have no clue. Is there any questions to that? Okay, so before I go any further, I'll turn on the recording. Okay, so yep, it should be running. Okay, has any of you looked at the recordings of past sessions we've had? Are they working out okay, Greg? Do they look good?
Yeah, look, we have 3 of them, right?
We have what?
We have is it 3 recordings? I have 1, and you have the other 2, right?
Yeah, yeah, we have. No, I think we have four now. So I
Okay.
lost track. I lost track. But
I think
anyways, there's one recording in there where I'm just recording the presentation screen. So what you're missing out is when I'm talking with my hands. Okay, there's Doug.
I think sometimes when someone else is talking, we don't always hear what they're saying on the recordings.
That's correct. That's one feature. I'm not sure if it's a feature or a shortcoming of the screen recording. It only records me talking. It does not record people talking from the other side. And yeah, I'm not sure if that's good or not. Um, Zoom used to record both sides, but then of course we always had to ask if everybody was okay with recording because anybody who would say something was recorded. But on this Google Screen Recorder, that is not a feature. Just can't do. So okay. Hey Doug, and let me just pull up.
Slow computer startup. Sorry.
Yeah. I have so many open windows now. I can't find my windows anymore. Ah, there it is. Okay. So from the first 50 questions of this exam, that's the York Zoring exam with it, you guys worked on, there were a few things I still want to explain. One is question 23, has to do with the flaps. And that question, unfortunately, that question is does not recognize today's flap technology. It's basically old style, like 1960s, 70s perhaps. So I wanted to talk to you about this a little bit. So let's pull this up. And that was quest. Okay, I should. So you should see my presentation screen now. Yep, it's up. And this was question number 23. Okay, so we go back. Question number 23. Okay, the question was for a flapped glider. Flaps would be lowered on landing approach to what? First of all, we want to make sure we know what lowering flaps means. Back in these days, flaps could only, when they were up, they were level with the wings, like in an airliner, and then lowering means the flaps are coming down. Nowadays, and I'll bring something up here. There. Nowadays on a glider, we have flaps that go down. So this is lowering the flap here. And can make this bigger. Lowering the flap here, but also we also have flaps that go up. So for example, my glider has six, seven actually flap positions. Position number 4 is like this. So the flap is neutral. Then anything smaller than 4, like 3, 2, and 1, are flaps going up like that. So, and we fly like this. You would wonder why we fly like this. The flap coming up means the airfoil is creating less lift, but also less drag. So for the faster we fly, rather than making the angle of attack less and less and less, or negative even. We make the wing just create less lift because we don't need that when we fly 100 knots, and therefore the wing is also has less drag. So, for example, my flap 4, which is this here, I fly between 50 and 60 knots. Above 60 knots, I go to flap 3, so it's up a little bit. Above 80 knots, I go to flap 2, it's up a little more. And then there is the super fast flap is number 1. That comes in about, if one has to go really fast, above 110 knots. Typically, I fly most of the time when I'm not in the thermal. I'm flying with the flaps slightly up. When I enter a thermal, of course, I want to be slow. So the slower we can fly, the tighter the radius in the thermal. And then the flap comes down. So this is when they talk about lowering the flap, it comes down. And I have, I said 4 is neutral. Then I have a thermal flap 5, which I never use when I fly forward, like between thermals. But in thermals, I use 5. There's another one, 6 is a little more. And then I also have a landing flap. And the landing flap goes even further down. And its purpose is not anymore to just create more lift. Obviously, as the flaps create more lift, they also have a little more drag. But at some point, as the flaps go further down, they just create more drag and not much more lift anymore. So that it's from a certain position on, it's just more drag. And that's what the landing flap is all about. So it's even steeper than this. And what it also does is nowadays the flaps and the ailerons go up and down together. So it's not just the flaps moving, the aileron is moving just with the flap. Because it would not make sense to have a wing where there's a flap moving and then outside there's the aileron. It's not. It's always in neutral position. But when we with many airplanes, also for example with the ASW20s, when you go into landing flap where this comes really down about what you can see here, that's pretty. It's quite a bit down. The ailerons go back up, and only the flap is causing drag because when you're in landing flap, you're not so in. It's not so important to have lift anymore. It's more important to have more drag. And so when we go back to this question, of course, this question was written at a time when gliders used flaps for landing because they didn't have dive brakes. There was a time because it was very difficult to build dive brakes and integrate them into the wing, into a laminar airfoil, without the dive brake sticking up a little bit or so. And therefore, a lot of designers decided, you know what, landing is, that's, people don't do this very often. I design my wing for flying, not for landing. Therefore, no dive brakes, and the pilots just have to then deal with the flaps for the landing. And what they had as for landing is that the flaps really came down almost 90 degrees basically to the airflow, which allowed them a fairly steep approach, but it's also very difficult with normal air brakes. The way we use them now, we also call them spoilers, is as soon as you close, if you push the lever forward, right away the airplane starts going, and it doesn't lose any lift or anything. It just accelerates. So it's very easy with these air brakes to stay on your glide path. You may not agree that it's very easy, but it is the easiest way of doing it. In the old days with these flaps, so if you find out, well, now I'm getting a little low, I'm below my glide path. Now I want to increase my glide angle to make it to the airport. You had to actually bring the flap back up, which means you also lost lift. So first of all, when this happens, the airplane sort of goes down before it even accelerates, right? And so this is pretty dicey stuff. It's not easy. The only plane at SOSA that has flaps like this is Eddie Hollistell's HP 18, I think it is, with the metal V-tail. So when he's out there, take a look at these flaps and take a look at when he's landing, right? He's very good at this, but it's not easy. So and this was sort of the common thing in the 70s and early 80s. Nowadays, we don't use flaps like this anymore. But that's basically what this question is aiming at. So it says here, for a flapped glider, flaps would be lowered on landing approach to do what? And the options are to decrease your gliding angle by increasing the lift on the wings. Wouldn't be entirely wrong. Or to steepen your gliding angle by increasing aircraft drag. And this is in this context here is the right answer. And for these types of flaps that they use for landing, for example, Eddie Hollister, that's the right answer. But and then there's to prevent undershooting by gliding further at a lower speed. It's not true. Fly faster at the same time, glide further, definitely not. If you put the flaps down, you don't fly faster and you don't fly further. The right answer today, if somebody would ask me, why are you using flaps on landing? It is to reduce my touchdown speed. The modern gliders, they touch down so fast. And the ground run, particularly over our bumpy runway, is not very comfortable. We get thrown around in the cockpits pretty good. And so the slower we can touch down, the better. And the less energy we have to dissipate once we're on the ground, it's much easier to manage. So that's in today's world, the main reason why we use flaps on landing is to allow us, since the flaps increase the lift when they come down, they allow you to fly slower. And with flying slower, you have a lower touchdown speed. That's for me the main reason. So it doesn't really have to do anything with the glide angle or the steeper approach. I do all of this with the dive brakes, and we all of us do this. It is the main reason is basically to bring down the speed, the touchdown speed. But in this context, and just keep in mind, all these questions are based on old gliding information written by people who were in the Air Cadets in the 70s. That's where this comes from, right? In this case, number 2 is the right answer. It is to when they talk about flaps, to steepen your approach. So because the flap will increase your drag. It was true then, not true today anymore. Okay, any questions to that? And the other question I want to highlight in here is because it's a good example of that you really have to read the question well and also the answers before you tick off the right answer, right? And this is the question 38. Standard spin recovery procedure is to apply full opposite, and then you have all sorts of options. Obviously, we all know, or you should all know, that how do we get out of a spin is opposite rudder, full opposite rudder, until the turning stops, and then perhaps move the stick a little forward or ease the stick forward, as we say, and then you fly out once it has stopped. However, when you just read the question really quickly and not all the way to the end, and then you go through your answers, it says here, rudder to the direction of the spin and lower the nose. Of course, you know what we need to do, so you say, well, this must be a wrong answer, right? We're putting counter rudder in, not rudder to the direction of the spin. But the part of the answer is up here, and it says opposite rudder to the direction of the spin, which makes this the right answer. So read the takeaway of this question is you need to really read the question all the way through, and also the answers all the way through, to make sure you're getting it right. They're playing around with words there sometimes. And I mean, personally, as an ESL guy, I'm really opposed to questions that are worded to make you stumble. That shouldn't be. They should be worded to make you to test if you know your stuff, not to make you stumble. But this is one of those. So the important thing is, just want to is a good example here, and there's more examples of this we'll come across. Is you have to really read the question all the way, maybe twice, and go through all the answers. Don't go the first answer that looks right, and then decide what is your right answer. Another strategy is you have 50 questions and you have 2 hours. There's a lot of questions you can answer. You can basically answer in less than a minute. But some questions need some work, right? Particularly when it's about the wind speeds and your heading and wind speed, and what's the magnetic heading then, or what is the compass heading, and all these things, where you may have to draw a few arrows on a piece of paper. Don't get hung up on a question like this. Go do all the easy questions you can answer quickly first, and then when you're done, hopefully you have lots of time left, and then you can go through these questions, or if there's a question you really have to think about, then you can go back to these questions, so mark them on the paper, where you say, oops, this is a question I need to think about now, and now I have time. You get 2 hours, right, for the whole test. And then you make the best of the question you can. It would be bad if you get hung up on 2 or 3 questions. You use up too much time, and then in the end you run out of time, and you miss the last 5 questions because you don't have time anymore. That would be a bad outcome. So get the quick questions first, and then take your time with the questions that need time. And as I said, most questions you can answer in less than a minute. So 50 questions, 50 minutes. So you should have plenty of time at the end to then work on these questions that take more time. Does this make sense? Okay, so we want to now go to the second part. Now, Doug, you already did those. So for you, it will be a review. Sorry for that.
Jörg, could we go over 14, 15, I think it is, with the math of the rate of descent and miles per hour? I think I got the answers right, but it was more logical than actually the math that I actually tried to figure it out. I couldn't come up with the answers.
Okay.
By doing the math.
The math. Okay. Well, we'll go through that. Okay. Question number 50 is a question you all know, right? The minimum flight visibility for VFR flight, not IFR, VFR flight in a control area is. Now, control area is really something that's pretty undefined. I mean, we know about controlled zone, we know about controlled airspace. Personally, I don't really know a control area, but nevertheless, it must be controlled airspace. So we go with the minimums for controlled airspace. What is the VFR minimum for controlled airspace? Okay, you should all raise your hands and say, I know. Okay, Reg knows. Okay, Greg knows. Doug knows. Good. Yeah, it's 3 miles. This is the answer. And this is not nautical miles. This is, strangely enough, is land miles, statute miles. And all the weather reports are also in statute miles, so 3 miles. For uncontrolled airspace, it's sometimes 1 mile, sometimes a little more, depends how high you are. But for controlled airspace, it's 3 miles. And just as a quick review, what we have done before, let's look at some controlled airspace. Yep, there's our airspace here. Remember that one? You actually have it, or you should have it in your files. We can make it a little bigger. Oh, nice. Okay, so this is basically the airspace in Canada. And we're going basically going backwards, if we count backwards, from Class G airspace, which is uncontrolled. Then F is something different. We'll talk about that today too. From G, F, and then we go to the lowest level of controlled airspace is Class E. So here at SOSA, and you notice that way out in the prairies or so, the uncontrolled Class G airspace goes all the way up to 12,500. But we are in southwestern Ontario. We have Toronto nearby, right? We have Kitchener control zone. We have the Hamilton control zone. So there's a lot of IFR traffic that needs to fly low to get into these control zones. So our Class G airspace is this little green you can see here. And when you go up, at 700 feet, it's over. At 700 feet, it flips into Class E. So for all practical purposes, where we fly, we always fly in controlled airspace. The only time we are not in controlled airspace is when we're in the circuit about halfway down, halfway past the downwind, we're down below 700 feet. Only then are we in uncontrolled airspace. So for us, the minima are always for controlled airspace, and so the under for controlled airspace, or where it flips to from uncontrolled to controlled, is either 700 feet, that's in the vicinity of control zones, that's where we are, or it is under airways. Airways go down to about 2200 AGL. So there it's a little higher. And then when there's no airways, we're way out in the boonies, then it goes all the way up to basically where they fly up there. So we have Class E, the lowest level of controlled airspace. We can fly around in there. We don't need to talk to anybody, but we have to adhere to the minima. Then there's higher levels of controlled airspace. That's for example, control zones. They can be Class D or they can be Class C airspace. For example, the Kitchener control zone is Class C and the Hamilton is Class D. In a Class C airspace, when you fly VFR, you need a clearance to fly in it. You cannot just fly into Class C airspace. For example, the Toronto Class C airspace is something like this. It's sort of a terminal control area, and the center is the controlled Toronto control zone. And over top is what we call the inverted wedding cake, which means it steps out with higher floors or ceilings, whatever you want to call this. So further in, they're pretty low. Now the outermost ceiling of the Toronto airspace, of the Toronto Class C, as we call it, is 3,500 feet MSL. And so if you want to fly under this, then we have to be less than 3,500 feet, which is not very high MSL, right? It's about 25 or a little 27 AGL. Anything higher, we would be in there, right? If you are lower, if you get closer to Toronto, then we should. And this starts, for example, if you go to the northeast or fly to Guelph, the Class C goes right over Guelph, and there is a cutout. So the lower part here is 1,000 feet higher than in this cutout. So it's 4,500, but everywhere else it's 3,500. I just got a text. Okay, very good. Okay, so the Toronto what we deal with in our area is mainly Class E, Class D, and Class C. Kitchener control zone is Class C. Toronto Class C, it's the terminal area, is also Class C. And then we go up to 12,500, and there's Class B airspace. And above that, above 18,000 feet or flight level 180 is Class A, and there's only IFR flying in Class A. In Class B, mainly IFR flying. They give some exceptions for VFR flying, but really they don't want to fly. They want to have anybody there flying VFR. So if you scroll down here, it explains, and you have this document. It explains what the Class A airspace is. It explains what the Class B airspace is. So it's there to service IFR aircraft and to control VFR aircraft. So yeah, in Class B you can fly VFR. In Class A you cannot, to exclude VFR aircraft. So there's no VFR flying in Class A. Class B with the clearances you can probably get in there, but yeah, you need, of course, you need oxygen and all these things, right? And what do you need to have? Well, we don't need to know what we need. It's not relevant to us. You need radio communication, radio navigation, transponder, and automatic pressure, altitude reporting equipment, which our transponders do, right? When we put them on alt, that's what they do. They report the altitude. So we are theoretically equipped to fly in Class B, but first of all, we are not getting high enough there, and secondly, they would not like us. They are now out west in the Rockies. And people flying in the wave there, they sometimes get either a window cut out of Class B where they can fly, or because the controllers in Calgary and Edmonton, they're also members of they're glider pilots. So they open sometimes a little bit of airspace if a glider needs to go through because he's in wave, and it can be done. So, but we don't, for us, this is too high. We don't have to deal with. We have to deal with Class C. And again, for Class C, we need a clearance. Here, VFR flights require a clearance from ATC to enter. In Class D, the next lower one, it says VFR flights must establish two-way communication with the appropriate ATC agency. Like if it's a control zone, it's the tower, of course. In this case, Hamilton Tower. But with control zones, even though they're only Class D, they can tell you to stay out, right? And then it would be a good idea to not argue with them, but to stay out. But the Hamilton guy is really nice. I mean, he usually is very helpful in letting us fly through the control zone or over the control zone when we come back from Niagara Falls and all these things. So in a few years, when you do these flights, hopefully he still will be nice. And when the tower closes, sometime in Kitchener, the tower used to close at 11 at night, local time. Then the Class D becomes Class E airspace because there's no more tower, right? And then the people talk. If you fly then in a control zone that has turned into Class E, there's no more ATC unit, then you talk like at Rockton, you're calling Hamilton traffic. So you broadcast what you're doing, so everybody knows this, and hopefully you will not run into another airplane there. Okay. So then we come to Class E, which is in our area basically all the airspace, and we usually fly in there. And then there's the uncontrolled, and then there's the special use airspace. We'll come to this later. It's on the maps, and there will be questions to this. There's a number of Class F airspaces. For example, over Kitchener, there is a women's prison. And there's Class F airspace up to 200 feet above ground over that prison. And all these airspaces are designated as CY. And then it can be P, which is prohibited, don't go there. R, which is restricted, don't go there. Or A. A means advisory area. You can fly into there. And the A can be either parachuting area where whether you have parachute, but you can fly in there, but you better be careful and see if you can talk to somebody. Or some gliding areas are also CYAs, and it is on the map. There is usually another letter behind it. So if it says P after the A, then it's parachuting. If it's G, I think it's gliding, and so on. And this is all on the maps, and they're clearly outlined on the maps as. I don't have a map open. When we get into the maps in the new year, we will do some map work. Then we'll look at these Class F airspace. I hope you by now have gotten all your maps, or maybe not because of the postal strike. But definitely you should have a map, and please make sure you have it by the time we get together again in January. And then if you scroll further down here, okay, so here's the designation of the Class F, the CY, and then there's the R, the D, and the A. And there's actually an airspace handbook out there that lists every Class F airspace in Canada by province. I have a copy of this handbook on my computer, but it's not something you will need. And then if it is an A, then there is another letter here, a suffix letter, which is A for aerobatic, F for flight test area. That's near Montreal. There's Bombardier Flight Test Area. Then H for hang gliding, military operations. I haven't seen any one of those. P parachuting. Oh yeah, gliding is not G. Gliding is S for soaring. And the training area for power training. I mean, that's what all these Cessnas that fly around SOSA do. They're basically going to and fro from the training areas. Okay. So in Canada, they're all called CY because the CY stands for Canada. Okay. And then there's a number, and with that number, you can look it up if you really need to, but it just, in the handbook, just tells you where it is, the size, and so on. Usually you get all the information from your map, what's going on in there. So if it's P or R, it's off limits. If it's A, then it usually explains why it is A and what's happening there. Okay. Okay, so we don't need okay, Class G. Okay, so if you scroll further down in this document, then it shows you the VFR weather minima in the different airspaces. So the type of airspace, there's control zones, aerodrome traffic zones, controlled airspace, uncontrolled airspace above 1,000, and uncontrolled airspace below 1,000. So if you fly in uncontrolled airspace above 1,000 AGL, you can fly with 1 mile visibility. We would never fly in conditions like that. So it's not something we need to do. If you fly at night,
Pardon me, Jorg.
Yeah.
We our uncontrolled is only up to 700 feet.
That's right.
So it would have to be that would apply.
2 miles. But again, we will not fly at 2 miles either.
Right. So the moment you get over it, you're in trouble for the 3 mile, right? The moment you rise above it.
Yeah, and we will
no longer.
We will for flying. We want to see at least 3 miles at SOSA, because we'll always get into controlled airspace, and 3 miles is still for gliding. I mean, 3 miles is if you're flying over SOSA, you can barely see the north end of the safari, right? And you can't see much past the safari anymore. That's how bad 3 miles is. So it's you can't see clouds, and so normally we wouldn't fly in weather like this, but when we had the smoke years, I remember there was one, and I think I told you already, there was one day where the sun was shining, but with all the smoke around, we were just around 3 miles, right? And Dave and I, we decided, nah, this is just not good. Let's not fly, right? But we were at about 3 miles. That's the lowest visibility I remember where we even considered flying. Okay, so all this, and you need to know this. What you also need to know is the distance from the clouds. We talked about this before because that's very in controlled airspace. That is very real, also for our real flying, and this is 500 feet vertically. You all know this. You can climb up within 500 feet of the cloud base, and then you got to stop. And 1 mile horizontal. We had one of our members once, he didn't know this. So he flies around there and he takes lots of photos and posts them all on Facebook, right? And he's clearly not a mile. I mean, he's basically horizontally is flying right up to the cloud, right? And he's also clearly not 500 feet below the bottom, right? And I called him up and told him, if you commit crimes, at least don't post them on Facebook. Keep it for yourself, right? Don't post the photos. He didn't know, but right away, I mean, somebody saw that, right, and pointed it out, and I was the CFI at the time, so I had to do something about this. Okay, so this is on this whole, with this whole chart here, relevant for us is the 3 miles and it's flight and ground visibility, right, in controlled airspace, and the cloud distances. That's for us important. So this is something you have to take past the exam into your normal flying operations. Everything else you can forget after the exam. You may need to know for the exam, but afterwards you can forget that. Okay, and I think that's pretty much, yeah, radio procedures and so on. We'll be talking about radio procedures probably this year in some hangar talks to get everybody a little more up to snuff about, first of all, talking loud enough on the radio, talking into the microphone, and all these things. Okay, I'll put this away again. Okay, 51. Oh, this is the journey log question, right? How long do I have to keep the journey log once you haven't flown anymore? And does anybody know the right answer on that one? Doug, probably.
I think I put 3 because I saw somewhere that it said 3, but then I also saw where it said 2. So I think the answer is 2.
I always thought it was 2, but I'm not sure about it either. So let's look at the answers. So one says 2 years after the date of the last entry in the log. Okay, could be. The next one, 3 years after the date of the last entry in the log, could be 2. Only if there's a valid certificate of airworthiness. Okay, it says if you don't have a valid certificate of airworthiness anymore, you can throw your logbook away. I would say no. And first of all, the journey log we never throw away, right? We don't. I mean, this is crazy to even think about throwing it out, right? And then the life of the aircraft could also be, but I know it's not the life of the aircraft. That I mean, I would always keep it for as long as I have this aircraft. But because you find it will be very difficult to sell the airplane if you don't have the journey log anymore. Okay, it is either 2 or 3 years. So let's look up the right answer. Okay, let's see. Right answer. This is 51. 51 is 2 years. Okay, now we know. Okay, keep that in mind. You have to keep it for 2 years. Okay, 52. To legally operate an aircraft, what documents must be on board? This is also a question that I think comes up every time in every exam. Okay, what do you need to have? There's 2 kinds of documents you need to have. Your personal documents, which is your license together with the medical, right? And your radio license. You need that. And then there's the documents for the airplane. And for the airplane, you need, so the first question says flight manual, weight and balance data, C of R, and C of A. It doesn't say anything about your pilot's license. So obviously, answer 1 is wrong. Answer 2, flight crew licenses. Yes, that's your flight crew license is your pilot's license and also your radio license. C of R, C of A, radio license, and journey log. Yep, this is I would say a high, what I believe you have to have. Now there's a question that you also should have the manual along, like in a power plane. I always have the pilot's handbook along too, and it has helped me once. This is good, but in a glider there's not enough room for the pilot's handbook. Okay, 3, flight crew medical, and radio certificates. So it doesn't say flight crew licenses, only the medical. The medical is normally part of your it's in your license, right? So this is not correct. Okay, and then there's 4, C of A, C of R, aircraft technical log. No, that stays on the ground. And operating limitations. No. So operating limitations placard. Yeah, the placards need to be in the airplane. And they are being checked. For example, if you import an airplane, or if it comes new from the factory, this is one of the things they do check when they sign it off for a certificate of airworthiness. Are all the operating limitations placards in there? So what is that? What are these placards? In every airplane, you have probably noticed there is a placard that says what the minimum pilot weight has to be, or the minimum weight. NOAA is probably up against that all the time, right? Gotta drag bags around, and that's placarded in the airplane. If for 2-seaters, it basically means pilot seat if there's nobody in the rear seat. Then it applies. But our students, we encourage our students always to bring their weight up to the minimum single pilot weight, because one day they will fly solo, and we don't want them to forget the bag when they fly, because then things may end badly. Okay, so my money is on number 2, because you definitely need your flight crew licenses. You need the CFR, the CFA. So CFR is a certificate of registration. The CFA is certificate of airworthiness. I'm not sure if you still need a radio license. If you still need a radio license, I think that there used to be 2 radio licenses, one for the airplane radio and one for your personally. You need definitely personally. You still need a radio license, but the aircraft radio license, I think, was scrapped. And the journey log, normally you need to take this along, but there's an exception. And the exception says if you intend to land at the same airport again, basically at home, you're not intending to fly somewhere else, you can leave the journey log on the ground. That's why we leave all our journey logs on the ground, because our intention is always to come back. It doesn't always work. But that's why, the journey log in a glider would not last very long either, right? It's just too cramped, and therefore we don't take them. But the journey log, for example, in the power plane, always has to be there. So now let's look what the right answer is. Okay, right answer come to me, 52, number 2. Yep. So this number 2 is the right answer. Okay, and this is a question, I think this is pretty much in every exam. You need to know that. And this journey log question there with when can you let it go, the 2 years, is a good thing to know as well, because I've seen this also in many exams. Okay. the most severe wake turbulence is produced by? Well, is it by small aircraft or by large aircraft? Obviously, by large aircraft. So wake turbulence. Do we all know what this is? So when a large let's say a jumbo jet flies along, right? It leaves a lot of wake. I mean, it leaves huge vortexes from the wingtips and a lot of turbulence in the wake of it. And the bigger the airplane, the bigger the wake turbulence. So definitely large aircraft. So there's already two of the questions already out. Two of the answers already out. Not small aircraft. And when do they have the worst wake turbulence? When they fly with a high angle of attack, when they fly really slow. And okay. Yeah, Doug's back, right? Good. So when they fly really slow, because the more they're sort of hanging in there, the more turbulence comes off the wingtips. So it is clearly, and they're usually, when do they fly slow? They fly slow during takeoff and landing. They're not flying slow during cruising flight. And so obviously the right answer is number one, large aircraft during takeoff and landing. Then you have to watch it. So if you fly power and you're lining up behind a 747, you better wait a little bit until you go on the runway and take off, or you take off before the 747 rotated. You can do that too and stay above the wake turbulence, because the 747 will only start making wake turbulence when it rotates, meaning the nose wheel comes up. Okay, I've been with my little Piper Arrow lined up behind a 747 once in Louisville. Scary stuff, I tell you. If he opens up the throttle a little too far, you go, woo, you're gone. Okay, then that's another frequent question here, hypoxia. An early symptom of hypoxia is, and they explain what it is, oxygen deficiency, is, we all know this, right? You get euphoric. This is the heinous thing about hypoxia, is that you feel actually really, really good. It's basically like having had 2 beer. You say, yeah, the world's great, feeling great, and I can fly a little higher. I'm already at 14,000 feet, but it's no problem. I can climb a little higher. And then at some point you see pink elephants out on the wingtip, right? So you climb a little higher and then you die. So what are the answers here? An increasing sense of well-being. That's the right answer. Drowsiness comes later. Dizziness comes later. And the development of panic as well. When you get hypoxic, you also get sort of tunnel vision. So your field of vision gets really focused, right? And every once in a while you get this feeling, oh my God, something's wrong, right? And it goes away again, right? So yeah, there is also panic can set in, right? So but the first feeling you have is everything's fine, like having 2 beer. Okay. 55, on tour, glider pilot finds that he cannot release the tow rope. The signal to indicate this to the tow pilot is, okay, we should all know the signal, right? What we do when we cannot release. We go, yeah, Reg knows it. Want to tell us, Reg?
Well, I heard you go out to the side and waggle the wings out to the side. I didn't know there was a particular side, but it says here right, so I assume that's the correct side.
Yeah, you go out to the right side, and and so let's see what's on offer here. So move to the highest possible tow position, no. Do a series of S turns, no. Purpose rapidly, no. Fly to the right and waggle the wings. Yeah, you're basically going on the right side of the tow plane, and then so you appear sort of in the peripheral vision of the tow pilot, right? And then you waggle your wings and tell him that tells him that you can't release. And if he releases, then because you're not directly behind the tow plane, the tow rope falls off and doesn't hit you, or the rings don't hit you because you're on the side. So that's what you do. But first of all, you tell him on the radio, right? Only if you can't tell him on the radio, then. But there is more important signals. There are two very important signals when you're on tow. And those two important signals are what? Who knows? Reg knows. Can you
I'll
tell
say
us?
one, and somebody else can say the other. I think if you include signals from the toe, one of the important ones I would imagine would be waggling the rudder.
Right. And what does that mean?
You have your air brakes open and are going to have a bad time if you release.
That's right. Yeah. The rudder waggle from the toe plane means you check your air brakes. And the other one is, Greg, you know. You should know.
Waggle the wings.
Yeah.
But you release right away.
You should release. Yeah. So there's waggling the rudder and waggling and rocking the wings. Waggling the rudder means air brakes. Rocking the wings means release. And the reason why these are the two most important signals is number one, because you have to do something right away, and number two, it's important not to confuse them. The people have, and this has happened frequently. They had the dive brakes open, the tow plane waggles the rudder, and they think, "Oh, I have to release," and they release. It's the worst possible thing. Yeah, you have the dive brakes open.
Oh, no.
You release. So make sure these are there's more signals, but these are the two most important signals, and very important is that you don't confuse them. And you should know this every time before you take off. In your mind, you should quickly revisit these signals and say, okay, rudder and rocking the wings. Don't confuse it. We had I've witnessed a takeoff, a young lady in a Puchacz, and as soon as the Puchacz started to accelerate, both dive brakes, the dive brakes went open. The Puchacz had dive brakes bottom and top, so there was nothing, sort of no gravity holding it down, because the bottoms pulled up the top as well. So they opened completely, and the tow pilot was the Citabria, right? First he tried to tell her on the radio that the dive brakes are open, and no reaction. Then he waggled the rudder, no reaction, because she didn't know. And good thing is the tow pilot was a hero. He pulled her over the trees, but just barely. If you would have the easiest for him would have been to just release her, and she would have gone into the trees, right? So the good end of the story is she survived, but it was tight, and I saw this from the beginning, and I felt totally powerless. I was at the line, at the flight line. We had a radio, but the radio didn't help because she wasn't reacting to radio, right? The tow pilot already was talking to her. And the last thing you want to do is, with something like this, then confuse the radio conversation too, because only one person can talk at a time on the radio frequency. So I was standing there and I was going, oh my God. But she survived. Or it wasn't even an accident. That was good. But she also, I don't think I've seen her since. She didn't come back. Okay, so and I really, the tow pilot is a hero in my mind, because he stuck it out and got the whole thing over the trees, right, and brought it around, and then they landed. Okay, so much for signals on tow, and yeah, the question is basically, if you cannot release, what do you do? And that's also a question that comes up fairly often. A weak link, you all know what a weak link is, right? It's the thing at the end of the rope, and it's this end of the rope or the cable, right? If it's the winch, then it's the cable, otherwise it's the rope. And and it's basically what it's there. If the load gets too big, and rather than ripping the tow hook out of the glider or something like this, or damaging the structure, the rope will break there. And every glider, it's in the manual, it tells you what kind of weak link it needs for aerotow and for winching. They're different. So that's important. Okay, I should. I'm going to rearrange my screen here a little bit to make so we can see. Okay, we can. It's better for the recording. Just hang on a little bit here. Nope, sorry. There we go. Okay, thank you. No, that's not good either. Okay, sorry for that. Okay, so weak link has to do either not with a control cable. There's never a weak link in the control cable. Control cable is what is a cable that leads to the ailerons and whatever. In gliders nowadays, these are all push rods. There's no more cables in gliders, but in power planes and in old gliders, there's also cables. Tow line, yeah. Dive brake, no. Canopy latch, no. It's either the tow rope or it's the winch cable. Both have weak links. Okay, a glider may fly in Class D airspace with ATC clearance provided VFR conditions exist, provided the glider has a two-way radio, only with permission from air traffic control at no time as this is not permitted. Well, we just went through all of this, so number 4 is definitely out. Number 3 is, well, if you're in a control zone, it would be good to have permission, right? You definitely need a two-way radio. And of course, VFR conditions also need to exist. So, but you don't need a clearance. So I would opt for number 2, but number 1 is also a possibility. So let's have a quick look. Okay, 57, number 1. Okay, so this is not exactly what we are told. Actually, in Class D, if it's not a control zone, you don't need an ATC clearance. You only need to establish two-way. You need to have more than a two-way radio. You need to establish two-way communication. So having the radio alone isn't helping you. You need to talk to whoever is controlling that airspace, right? And VFR conditions, of course, need to also exist. And this would be VFR for controlled airspace because Class D is controlled airspace. Okay. 58. At what altitude may an aircraft be flown over a city, a settlement, or settlement? So we have 4 options: not lower than an altitude which will permit a safe landing in case of an emergency. Yes, that's certainly true. Then number 2 would be 1 and 4. What does number 4 say? Not lower than 1,000 feet. Yep, that's also true. And not lower than 500 feet. No, it's 1,000 feet. Okay, so the correct answer is then 2. So correct is 1 and 4, but you have to tick off number 2. So this is where you also make sure you're not ticking off too quickly, right? Before you have seen all the answers. because number one is definitely right. Okay. And the other thing is not lower than 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a radius of 2,000 feet when flying over built-up areas. So if there's a tower in there or something, you gotta be either 1,000 feet above the tower, or you have to be 2,000 feet away. Okay. Straight lines on with Lambert conformal conic projections. Do we know what that is? Approximate. Okay, remember when we talked about rhumb lines and charts and all that kind of stuff? So there's charts where all the meridians are parallel. That's the Mercator projection. And they work pretty well sort of on plus minus 40-degree latitude, close to the equator, because that's where the meridians are pretty parallel. Further in the north, however, because all the meridians come together at the North Pole, they don't work. They're really spread out the north. So we are not using Mercator projections in flying. We are using actually a conic projection, which is we are putting. It's always difficult to take what's on a ball and bring it on a flat piece of paper. And the Lambert basically wraps the paper around it like a cylinder. The conic projection is where the paper actually gets smaller at the North Pole, and that's what we are doing. And so on our charts, on these Lambert charts, the meridians are not parallel. They are actually at a slight angle to each other, because in the end, at the top of the world, not at the top of the chart, they meet. And so a straight line on these charts approximates. What do we have? We have an arc of a great circle. We have a rhumb line joining the 2 points. A parallel of latitude. Really? A parallel of latitude is basically a horizontal line on the chart, which is gives you a certain latitude. Remember, there's meridians are the horizontal line, the vertical lines, and the horizontal lines are the latitude. They're called parallels. So 3 and 4 are out. They just threw this in to confuse you. So you have the choice between the arc of the great circle. Do we all know what a great circle is? A great circle is basically the point. If you on a globe, if you have 2 points, the great circle connects those 2 points, and that's the shortest distance between the 2 points. If you do this on a globe, this is a straight line. But of course, if you put this on a map, then depending on what kind of map you have, it is typically it's a curved line. And but if you have the conic, it's not comic, it's conic, right? Projection. It's basically a cone over the Earth there. If you put a straight line on there, it's not exactly a great circle, but it comes pretty close to the great circle. And therefore, number one is, I'm pretty sure, is the right answer. The rhumb line is a straight line on a Mercator, where you just put a line on. That's the rhumb line. And remember, the rhumb line crosses all meridians at the same angle. And but if the meridians have an angle to each other, you put a line on there, it's not crossing all the meridians at the same angle. It cannot. And therefore, number one is the right answer. Let's check this out. So it's 59. 59 is number one is the right answer. Okay. Swinging a compass is done to minimize error and record the what? We talked about swinging a compass, right? Do we all remember what this is? Yeah, I see Reg is giving me the thumbs up. Noah? Yeah, thumbs up. Hey, great. Okay, so everybody else as well. So swinging a compass is basically to find out, and what the way this is done is it's either the airplane is taken outside on a compass rose that's painted on the tarmac, and then they point it first to the north, and then they point it, so that rose is not moving, right? It's painted there. They paint the pointed north, and then through every 30 degrees, and is they check what does the compass say in the plane, and then they note the deviation. Basically, the compass isn't saying the same thing, or is not saying what the nose is pointing to. Let's say the nose is pointing to 90 degrees, and the compass is saying 87. Then there is a deviation of 3 degrees. Okay, so what does the swinging then do? Variation on various headings? No, we all know what the variation is. That's basically the difference between magnetic north and geographic north. And that varies across the country, but if you're in a certain, it doesn't vary across headings. So there can't be. Then deviation, and that's the compass. The variation is the difference between magnetic north and true north. The deviation is the individual deviation of, or the deviation of the individual compass. And that changes with the headings, and that's being recorded when you swing the compass. And that's basically, so swinging the compass is a term that's always being used, so you have to remember that. And what does it do? It has to do with the deviation. Okay, Reg.
Just to confirm, I really hope this is everyone's going to, they're like, yes, that's obvious. We covered that 3 times. The deviation is the difference between what the compass shows and what we know to be magnetic north, right? Because later on when we calculate, we add variation. So the deviation plus the variation ends up being true north.
Yes.
Is that right? We're measuring the difference between what it's showing us and what we know to be magnetic north.
Yes, right. So the big compass rose on the tarmac where they bring the plane out is actually oriented to magnetic north, not to true north. So it's the difference between magnetic north and what the compass shows. And when you do these calculations from true to compass heading, you always have to check, be careful what the question really is. Is the question, do you want to have a magnetic heading or do you want to have the compass heading? If it just have a magnetic heading, then you're just going from true to magnetic. If talk about compass heading, then you go from true to magnetic and then to compass with the variation. And they sometimes give you data you don't need for these. They give you more data than you need to confuse you. Okay, so it's the deviation. They're bringing up other things, the northerly turning error and so on, and the acceleration turning errors. Does anybody know what that is? This exists actually. There's nothing to do with this. But so show of hand, do we know what the turning errors are? Not yet. Okay, we'll talk about this. Okay, 61. When hangering your aircraft at night, the altimeter is set, and we have had that question too, right? Is set to the airport elevation at 520 feet. At night, a low pressure area moves over the airport. The indicated altitude observed the next day would be, obviously, when the pressure gets lower, the altimeter goes up, right? So if the next day the pressure is lower, it will show a higher number at the altimeter. So it's the 520 feet higher than 520. It will not show the same. It will show higher than 520. It will not do lower. So if the pressure rises, then it shows lower. And the same as the current altimeter setting is just to confuse you. Okay, but it's easy question. We all understand, and all you need to know is when you fly, when you climb, the air pressure drops and the altimeter goes up. Therefore, when the air pressure drops, the altimeter goes up. Okay, the most important atmospheric element from the weather standpoint is, well, it is water vapor. Remember, we talk about moist air. An air mass is defined by humidity and temperature. And the humidity has a huge effect in there because it will cause the clouds. So it will, high humidity will mean you have a lot of clouds. Low humidity means no clouds, and so on. So it's the water vapor. And from a weather standpoint, nitrogen is immaterial, oxygen is immaterial, and water droplets that is already a cloud. It's basically a cloud that has where condensation has taken place, but it is really the water content of the air mass measured in relative humidity. Relative humidity is in percent, and it's in percent how much to 100% is it's totally saturated. So if it's 50%, it's half saturated. And we can also, there's two ways to express relative humidity. The other one is with the dew point. Do we know what the dew point is? The dew point is the point where if you cool it down to the dew point, then the water will condense out and will form a cloud. So if you see if the temperature is 20 and the dew point is 10, you're pretty dry. But if the temperature is 20 and the dew point is 19, you're almost saturated. And if the temperature goes down 1 degree, then you have fog. So in aviation, it is usually referred to as in terms of the dew point. In the regular weather reports, it's more the humidity in percent. Okay, so that brings us to water vapor on 62, 63. Clouds form when moist air overruns cold air. Okay, clouds form when moist air overruns cold air with the warm air. Okay, interesting. Somebody had a problem writing the question. But when do clouds form? When moist air rises or is forced up, then clouds form because it cools. Okay, so when moist is cooled by the cold air underneath, is cooled by the surrounding cold air aloft, becomes unstable as a result of cooling from below. No, definitely not. Cools as a result of expansion as it rises. Yep, this is how clouds form. However, let's just see if number 4 is the right answer before we go any further. Okay, 63. Yeah, and number 4 is the right answer. But there's also, when an air mass is being cooled from below, let's say the ground is really cold because it's a clear night and the ground radiates all its heat away throughout the night and gets really cold, and it starts cooling the air close to the ground. Then you can have it cools the air from below. You can actually have fog. You don't get clouds, but you can have fog because the ground is so cold now that the air directly above it is being cooled down due to the fact that it is in contact with the ground, and it will have fog. And there's A typical question is what happens if an air mass is being cooled from below? Fog happens, is the right answer. That's sort of a very similar question than this. And this here the option number one is kind of alluding to this. The only difference is it's first of all not clouds that form, it's fog. And secondly, and what's the difference between fog and clouds is the fog is on the ground. It's cooled from underneath, but not by cold air from underneath. It's cooled by a cold ground from underneath. And if it's cold air, the warmer air mass will just slide up over top of the cold air. And the sliding up means it's expanding, it's cooling down, and makes that's basically the scenario of a warm front. Makes clouds. Okay, wind is caused by rotation of the Earth, friction between the air and the ground, horizontal pressure differences in the atmosphere, the movement of fronts. Well, wind needs to be caused by, obviously, by pressure differences. If there's an area of high pressure, it will start blowing or moving air towards the low pressure. That's causing the wind. So it's the horizontal pressure differences in the atmosphere, highs and lows. So the high, the air, do we know which way the air leaves the high? It circulates. It's leaving it in a circulation, and in the high is a clockwise circulation. So the air comes out of the high pressure in a clockwise direction. And why does it circulate in the first place? Do we know that? Because of the Coriolis forces. Remember? Yeah, I see nodding. Okay, it comes up and goes into the low in a counterclockwise direction. Okay, so, but in this case, number 3 is the right answer. It's the horizontal pressure difference in the atmosphere. You have a high and a low, and that's causing the wind. Okay, in the northern, but now we are coming to the clockwise and counterclockwise. In the northern hemisphere, the wind blows clockwise about a high and clockwise about a low. No. It blows clockwise about the high, but the counterclockwise around the low, right? So number 1 is wrong. Counterclockwise about a high? No. Clockwise about a high and counterclockwise about a low? Yep, that's the right answer. So you have to go through this and so that's counterclockwise about a high and clockwise about the low. No. Okay, 66. If a thin coating of frost, ice, or snow forms on the wings of an airplane, the takeoff shouldn't be attempted since. Okay. Why don't we want to take off if you have ice on the airplane?
To deform the airfoil?
Yeah. If it's the ice, first of all, it weighs something, but if it's just frost, it doesn't weigh much. But still, it's first of all, there's no more laminar airflow because the frost makes it turbulent right away. It deforms the airfoil, and you don't get enough lift and all the good things. So you should clean this off and see what answers we're being offered here. The coating will disturb the airflow over the wings and destroy lift. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. The added weight may overload the airplane, while frost doesn't add much. If the airplane would be sitting out in freezing drizzle or freezing rain, that's the difference. It may be just too heavy to fly, but I mean, it would be coated in ice and you would never even think about flying it, right? The covering is cold and brittle. No. The wing's shape has been altered due to contraction. The wing's shape may have been altered, but not due to contraction. Okay, so it is basically, the coating will disturb the airflow. Okay, 67. Which speed would be affected by a change in wind speed and direction? Okay, so we have. I have an echo in there somewhere. Comes probably from you, Rage, but it. Okay, yeah, it came from you. But if you want to say something, open your microphone. No problem. Okay. Which speed would be affected by the change of wind speed and direction? The true airspeed. So what airspeeds are there? There is the indicated airspeed, there's the true airspeed, and there's the ground speed, right? The indicated airspeed is what the airspeed indicator says. The true airspeed is indicated airspeed, basically corrected for the density of the air. And the ground speed is the true airspeed plus the wind. So the wind speed affects the ground speed. The speed of sound, no, that's just in there to confuse you. Okay, so number 3 is the right answer. Landing through a strong wind gradient. The glider's airspeed may A, increasing, remain constant, fluctuating wildly, decreasing. I think what they mean is when you land through a strong wind gradient into the wind, what we normally do, right? We land into with a headwind and with a strong gradient. That means where you fly at 300 feet, the wind is a lot stronger than down at the ground. So what happens with your indicated airspeed? It will, or the glider's airspeed, it will decrease because all of a sudden you're having less headwind. It's pretty logical, right? But there's another way to this, and this is if you land with the wind. And a lot of people don't know this. So if you land do a tailwind landing, right? And if there's a strong a gradient, that means you're flying with the wind pretty fast because it's strong, right? And then as you go down, the air is moving slower, so your airspeed, your indicated airspeed increases actually. So it's exactly the other way around. If you have a tailwind. So therefore, in a tailwind landing, in a headwind landing, if there's a strong gradient, you want to add extra airspeed to basically make up for that you lose airspeed. But if you have a tailwind landing, you want to fly with definitely not with more airspeed than you absolutely need, because otherwise the runway won't be long enough for you. You'll be floating, and then you touch down with a huge ground speed, and you hit the fence on the other side. So with a tailwind landing, and even if it's and if it's very windy, even more so, you really have to approach with right at the yellow triangle, which is the no wind approach speed for our airplanes, right? And not above the yellow triangle. And a lot of people don't know this. And I've flown with students, and we did tailwind landings, and they didn't know this very basic thing, right? And came in with way too much airspeed because it was a windy day. No, when you do a tailwind landing, minimum airspeed, yellow triangle. Yellow triangle is a safe speed, and you don't need any extra speed because you gain extra speed as you fly through the gradient. Okay, but this question is clearly aimed at landing into the wind. So if the surface wind is gusting during landing, it is important to always use full flaps, land as slowly as possible. Well, always use full flaps, definitely not, because our airplanes don't have flaps, right? At least not the club airplanes. Land as slowly as possible, no. Maintain the same airspeed you would use in smooth air, no. You all know what we do. We fly a little faster if it's gusty. carry a little extra airspeed to ensure positive control. Yes. So how much extra airspeed do we actually need when we have a gusty wind and say it's a headwind? Does anybody know? At SOSA, we add full wind speed. So if it's a 10 knot wind, then we add 10 knots, and then we add half the gust. So if it says wind, let's say we are flying on the 36 and the wind's from the north, and let's say the wind is 10 gusting 20. Then we add the 10 for the wind, and then half the gust. The gust is basically from 10 to 20. That's the gust. And we add another 5. So we take yellow triangle plus 15 knots. That's how we come in. That's sort of SOSA, and other clubs have similar rules, but for us this is the most works for our fleet the best. We have a modern fleet, so it's if you have airplanes that fly really slow, you have to be a little more careful. Okay, but for us, wind speed plus half the gust is the extra speed that we need. So which we need. So we are not just saying a little extra airspeed. Yellow triangle, and that's exactly when we do the downwind, the pre-landing checks. Airspeed means what will be our approach speed based on the wind, and that's exactly what you should by that time already know. And remember then when you turn, when you come on when you're on base, you should accelerate to that airspeed. Okay. 70, flight in cloud without proper instrumentation in an airplane and instrument flight training. So without proper instrumentation and instrument flight training will result in death. Disorientation, yes. Loss of control of the airplane, yes. Structural failure of the aircraft, eventually. All of the above, yes. 4 is the right answer. So no flying in clouds is really dangerous. Okay. An airplane loaded with the aft CG limit exceeded will be. Is this a good thing? No, it's bad, dangerous. We try never to have this occur. So what happens will be difficult to put into a stall or spin. No. Nose heavy. No. It's tail heavy, right? It's the aft CG. The aft CG limit exceeded. If the front CG limit would be exceeded, then the nose will have a hard time to keep the nose up. But in this case, no, not nose heavy. Difficult to get off the ground. No. Easy to stall and spin recovery will be more difficult or impossible. So if it's far enough back, if you stall it, you cannot recover from this anymore. So we had an incident this year at the flight line where a student with his junior flew with the tail dolly attached. And the tail dolly is a pretty chunky thing on the junior. How far aft the CG was, we don't really know. But I told him on the radio, never allow your speed to be less than 65 knots. 65 knots is pretty good speed for the junior. And my thinking was that will allow him to have enough elevator authority or elevator effectiveness that he can, if you have an aft CG, the elevator may have to become a wing, so it may have to help with flying, so it produces lift. And when the elevator doesn't have enough lift anymore because you're flying too slow, it goes down and there's no way you can bring it back up anymore. The nose goes up, and no matter what you do, the nose will stay up, the glider will go into a flat spin and you die. So I told him, do not let the speed drop below 65. And he came in and he landed. Was it really dangerous? We don't know. I never have done the calculations because I don't want to know what the result would be. But he stepped out of the airplane and was a healthy young man and happy that this wasn't a problem, and everybody else was too. Man. Okay, Reg.
Just a quick question. If we wanted to, if we weighed it and then figured out from the POH where the datum line was and measured the distance, we could in fact figure out what had happened to the CFG.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's part of, we're supposed to know how to do that calculation as part of our, like, as part of this exact ground school, right?
Yeah, that's more. Yeah, it could. Yeah, there is usually, I think, the last question in the series is a CG question. You should know this. And again, when you come for your flight test with me, I'll needle you on the CG questions to the point where you start hating me. Okay. Yeah, and we could figure it out. It's basically you measure the arm, which is how far back is that tail dolly at from the reference point, and then you put all the moments together and calculate the CG. What you need to know is also the weight of the pilot and how much weight he had additional ballast because he's underweight. So, but still, he didn't have additional ballast to ballast the tail dolly. That's for sure. And the smaller the airplane is, and the lighter the airplane is, the worse this is. On a bigger airplane, let's say on the Duodiscus, it's a big heavy airplane. If the tail dolly stays on, it's not the end of the world, right? Particularly if there are two pilots in the front. But small airplane, ouch, not good. Okay. A front is, remember when we talked about air masses, and fronts are basically the boundaries between the air masses. And when the air masses move, if a cold air mass moves into a warm air mass, it actually goes under the warm air mass. And if a warm air mass moves into a cold air mass, it goes over top of the cold air mass. Okay. So and the boundary layer is the front. So what is a front? It's a narrow transition zone between cyclone and anticyclone. No. A line of thunderstorms. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, definitely. But it doesn't necessarily, not every front is a line of thunderstorms. A narrow transition zone between two air masses. Yeah, here we go. Remember the two air mass things? That's the right answer. A thick cloud layer which covers a wide area. The thunderstorms and the cloud layer may be byproducts of a front, but they are not the front, right? Okay. The general characteristics of the warm front are good flying weather, clear but unstable air, precipitation, low ceilings, poor visibility, clear, good ceilings, and stable air. Well, it depends a little bit where that warm front is. Initially, when as the warm air sort of goes over top of the cold air, you have pretty good flying weather, and you have high clouds, cirrus, and so. So depending on what you define as good flying weather, there won't be great thermals, but it could be a lovely day to fly. Clear but unstable air is definitely not right. Precipitation, low ceilings, and poor visibility. Eventually, when that warm front has pushed the cold air aside, that's what you have is precipitation. It will rain, ceilings will be low, visibility will be poor, and so on. Clear, good ceilings, and stable air, no. So it is either, it's probably number 3, I would say. Number 1 at the beginning as well, when it starts. But when the front is really through and the cold air is all out and the front's all the way to the ground, this is what you have, number 3. Let's see what it says, what the smart book says. 73. It says number 3. Yeah. Okay. So the classic for warm fronts, the classic thing is it will, when the front is there, it will start raining. The ceilings will be low. Visibility will be poor. I think I'm losing my voice. The cold front goes under the warm, and the classic signs will be, and there's questions about this too, that it can be really violent. There could be thunderstorms because the cold air is like a wedge that goes under the warm air, drives it up. It overdevelops. It can be very windy, violent, and eventually the air temperature will drop as the cold air comes in, and the winds will veer, and veering means to the right. Basically, if you look into the wind changes to the right. We know how this is called when the wind goes to the other side, to the left side. It's called, guys, backing. There's veering and backing. So the wind, when you look into the wind, goes to the right, it's veering. If it goes to the left, it's backing. Now, typically where this comes up in questions, don't have a throat coat tea today. Where this comes up in questions is when you take off and you gain altitude, what happens to the wind? And the right answer is usually it gets stronger, because the wind aloft is usually stronger than on the ground, and it veers to the right. It's typically when you sort of leave the ground that the wind veers a little bit. So it veers and gets stronger. That's when you sort of go off the ground and climb, and when you sort of descend and come down to the ground, it's exactly the opposite. The wind gets weaker and it backs a little. Okay. Number 74. The kind of front that accompanies a line squall is, what are the answers? I gotta quickly go and blow my nose. You can think about the answers in the meantime. How is that? Okay. So, what are the answers? Any guesses?
Is this question 74?
Yes. Squall line.
I think it's a cold front.
Yes. Yeah. Again, cold front, violent weather, and there could be thunderstorms, squall lines, and so on. Okay, I'm getting big echo from you when I'm talking. So if you could, yeah, perfect. The dissipation of fog is assumed to result from an increase in wind to blow the fog away, condensation of the suspended water droplets in the fog. No, dissipation means it disappears, right? So definitely not 2. And number 1, it's not that the wind blows it away. It needs to be heated out. So basically, the air has to get so warm that it absorbs the fog, or the fog dries up. Okay. So condensation, now this is all wrong. Heating from below by sunlight, which filters down through the fog. Yep, that's the answer. That's if you have sort of a ground fog in the morning, if the sun gets through the fog, heating the ground, and because the fog was caused by the ground being cold, right? If the ground is being heated up, the fog goes. Okay, and cooling the air mass resulting in a decrease in no. It is basically the heating from below by sunlight. Okay, number 76. Pilot can expect airframe icing when flying in. Airframe icing typically occurs, first of all, you have to be above the freezing level. And when we fly in gliders, we fly above the freezing level. And secondly, there has to be water. You either fly in cloud, and as gliders, we don't fly in cloud. Or you can also have, you can get rained on with super cooled raindrops, which is basically freezing rain. Then you can also airframe icing. So does it appear in clear air? No, even if it's cold. Visible precipitation with temperatures below 0 degree. Yes, this is bad. This picks you up. There's two kinds of airframe ice. One is rime ice and one is clear ice. The rime ice is basically like frost you have on your car in the morning when it's a cold night. That's not so bad, but clear ice, it builds up very quickly. And this is basically the same what we get on the ground when we have freezing rain. It builds up and clings on and is heavy. It changes the airfoil and is heavy on top of it. And it's terrible. But in gliding, we don't have to do this kind of stuff because we don't fly in conditions like this. So it is visible precipitation below freezing. Yes. And what else do we have? Cloud with temperatures below. Cloud with temperatures above 0 degrees. No, you have to be above the freezing level or below 0. Under any of the above conditions, no. It's clearly the visible precipitation with temperatures below 0 degrees. You also get icing, airframe icing, if you fly in cloud below 0, but not above 0. Okay. But in gliders, I mean, this is something you need to know for the exam, but it is immaterial for gliders also. A few years ago, we were towing our Duodiscus in April, over to Brantford to do some early checkouts for the instructors, so we could go in quickly. And sure enough, Raphael was flying in the Duo. We were towing, and he was icing up because they were getting pretty close to cloud, and the cloud was raining out of the cloud a little bit. It was so cold. That was the only time I remember icing on a glider, and we saw that he released the canopy was also icing up. He released, landed out because he had no other choice. But
I believe New Year's Day this year, James went up and they got a little icing on the tail.
Right.
On
Yeah,
the winch.
I remember we were winching under certain conditions where it was sort of a little drizzling. We also picked up ice. Yeah. But under normal circumstances in gliding, we don't fly in condition where we have icing and I mean, if we winch, the exposure is really brief, right? Okay. Some of the hazards of thunderstorms are turbulence, hail, and lightning. The type of cloud in which these conditions are likely to occur is okay. So when do we get thunderstorms? We get thunderstorms with huge vertical development. That means the clouds, the queues have to go so high that the top in the top the water freezes, and there's basically ice particles that sort of rub against each other, and that's causing the static, the electric static, and the lightning. Okay, so what's and there's usually hail. So some of the hazards of thunderstorms are turbulence, hail, and lightning. The type of cloud in which these conditions are likely to occur is nimbostratus. Nimbus, by the way, when it says nimbo, that means it's raining. But stratus means it's not a convective cloud, it's a layered cloud. So this is a typical cloud we have in a warm front where it rains out of a stratus layer. No. Stratocumulus, no, they're higher up anyways. They don't have much moisture. And they're just sort of little cues in an otherwise strato layer. It's and there's no precipitation or anything. Altocumulus, same thing. They're a little way up there, little cumulus clouds, but that's not what it is. It is the cumulonimbus. This is the nimbus. Remember, it's the rain. So that's a cumulus cloud that rains. And we also call them CBs. And they are basically the clouds that give us the thunderstorms and all the terrible things that come with it. And we have seen it at SOSA. So when we hear thunder, then it's time to get these gliders into the hangar, because if they're left outside, they can also be very gusty. And a thunderstorm is basically like a big vacuum cleaner that sucks things in at the front and spits stuff out at the back. And there will be all sorts of downbursts and so on. So not nice to fly in. 78, severe
Can you,
turbulence.
can I ask
Yep.
a quick question? Can you show us any pictures of different clouds? And I hear these words and stuff. I'm not quite sure I understand outside cumulus what these clouds look like.
Sure. Let me just think if I have something handy right now. I'll in January when we get together, I'll put some clouds together to show you what I have. Hundreds of pictures of clouds because I like clouds. So yeah, I'll put something together that shows you stratus clouds, cumulus clouds, nimbus clouds. Oh, there's yeah. Reg is holding up something there. Mm-hmm. I've seen that picture. Yeah. Let's see if I have something there. No, I don't think I have anything handy, but I'll make a note next time we get together. And we didn't get to the weather today, so we'll do this next time too. I'll have pictures of clouds and show you what they look like. Okay, so the cumulonimbus clouds, they are the biggies, and they are certainly to be respected. Okay, and they're also being respected by airliners, by the way. The airliners try to stay above them, which is okay in the latitudes we are here. However, around the equator, they go a little higher. They can go up to 60,000 feet, right? So the airliners sometimes have to go through them, and they don't like this at all. It was a factor in the big Air France crash there that went into the southern Atlantic coming up from Brazil or so. Thunderstorms were definitely a factor there. Okay, we have severe turbulence in mountain waves would most likely be associated with cap clouds, rhoda clouds, lenticular clouds, cumulonimbus clouds. The turbulence when there's wave conditions usually comes through rotors. Rotors, they are sort of in the boundary layer between the fast moving air that has the wave and the air below, and they're extremely turbulent. And they also have typical they look like very broken up and short-lived cues. So I would say um, rotor clouds, that's where the strongest turbulence is. Lentis we will also see on a wave day, but they're higher up, and where they are, there's no turbulence. But of course, you see the lenti high up. You try to climb up. You're climbing through the rotor, and you have to basically burn your way up through the rotor. You get rattled around pretty hard. I remember I was in a rotor over the Alps, and the speed was going between 50 and 110 back and forth. It was nothing I could do. Pulling the nose up or down, and so it didn't really make a difference. So all I did was maintain a reasonable attitude, and unfortunately, I was strapped in well, because otherwise I would have been thrown out of the airplane. That's how turbulent it was there, and just tough it out. Keep the attitude right, and don't worry about the speed, because it was so turbulent, and with that turbulent, the speed changed by 50, 60 knots in seconds. Okay, so it's roller clouds. Okay, one time for one more, and then I'll let you go, Izad. The dew point, yes, that's a good question. We all know what it is, right? It's expressed. The dew point is expressed in temperature, and it's the temperature at which the water starts condensating out of the air. That's the dew point. So, what is it? A figure representing relative humidity. Possibly. So I would put this aside as a possible answer, because it has to do with the relative humidity. The temperature to which air must be cooled at a constant pressure to become saturated. Yep, that's the answer. Definitely, that has all the right elements in there. We said it's the temperature, right? Okay, what is the number 3? The amount of moisture present in the air. It has to do with this, but number 2 is definitely the answer. Number 4, the temperature to which the air must be warmed to become saturated. No, that's the wrong way around. Okay, but I mean, number 2 is the right answer, but number 1 and number 3, they definitely, the dew point expresses, they're connected to the dew point. But what is the dew point? It is the temperature. And if we cool the air mass to that temperature, it's saturated and will make fog. Okay, 8:59. Sorry, I didn't think of bio break. And so we'll meet again January, I think it's January 9. We'll have a different login then, but then the login will be the same again for all sessions. And I will send you homework so you don't get too bored over the holidays. And send it back to me. We do it the same as previous homework. Do 50 questions. I'll send you a 100-question a set of 100 questions, but I want you to do 50 first and then send this out. So because it gives you more practice, it's more like a real exam. The exam has 50 questions, and time yourself as well. And then send it off to me, and I'll send it back we'll grade it and send it back, and then you can do the other 50 questions and send it back to me again. And so after in January, then we'll do more weather. I wanted to do this today, but I guess we got talking about too many other things, and dive more into the weather, the METAR, the TAFs, and also area forecasts. different types of area forecasts and things like isobars. Do we all know what isobars are? These are the lines of equal pressure. ISO is always equal. And the other thing we need to do in the new year is map work. And so I hope by then you will all have your maps. And the most important part of your map is actually the outside jacket, because that's where the legend is on there. And there are certain things on there I want to point out to you, because there is, you would normally never sort of pay attention to it, but there are questions about it, right? For example, there's a question, how are heights shown in the map? And the answer is by the tint. So basically, a high is when you go high, it's brown, right? When you go low, it's green. And the tints are actually that show up in the map. There's a little window in the outside cover that shows the range of tints on this particular map, and it also shows the range of heights of this particular map. So it's quite interesting. And these questions are easy to do, and it would be sad if you would miss one in the exam and lose a few points about them. Okay, with that, wish you great holidays, happy new year, and a good exam next year. Absolutely, we had never has anybody failed in this course, so hey, the pressure is on.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays, happy Christmas, everybody. Does Hamilton Airport sell these maps?
I'm pretty sure in Kitchener at the airport, the flying club is selling them. You can also order them. I'll send out a link where they can be ordered in Montreal, but now with, of course, the postal strike is a problem, right? Because
I ordered mine from Nav Canada, and it came FedEx.
Oh, whoa, okay.
And it was about $16 a map, I think.
Well, that's a good price. They're sort of ranging. Prices I've seen is about 20 or so. Yeah, that's good. Can you send out a link or an address where to order them from NAV Canada?
Yeah, okay.
I didn't know NAV Canada was selling them.
I bought mine from an aviation store that's close to Pearson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had them on the rack there. I just happened to be near the airport, and it was easy.
Yeah, I'm sure in Hamilton at the where they have sort of the general aviation area, I'm sure there's probably a store that sells maps as well. But I know in Kitchener the club has them, right? Because the club is a huge school, right? And Hamilton, there's not much small airplanes anymore. Okay.
And did you send us the corrected version of the exam we did?
I thought I did. So what I typically do is you send me the, you know what, Greg? I couldn't read what you were sending me. This was a format that was not an Excel file. I couldn't open that.
Okay.
So if I mean, what I'm sent, the sheet I sent you to put your answers in is an Excel file. So if you still have those answers in an Excel file, send me the Excel file.
Okay.
Then I send you the corrected version. Okay. But normally I do this. I send anything you send me, I send back with explanations as well. So read through this, and it also is a good guide for me, because then I can see where we need to still focus. Okay, well, hey, it was fun. You guys are a good group. So enjoy the holidays, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Jörg.
Happy
Thank
holidays.
you.
Okay, bye.